Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I have a habit of giving speeches, so sorry if I was interrupting you. It's better, yeah. So my name is Devdutt Patnaik and I write on mythology. And I always begin my sessions by explaining what is mythology, especially because around the world, and not just in India, mythology has become history. And I want to separate these two subjects because they are two very different subjects, because they are two different departments and two different job opportunities. Because head of department of history is very different from head of department of mythology. Should you want to start a course like that? And I will put my application for it. So what is the difference between history and mythology? There are three big differences I want you to draw your attention to. History deals...
History has remained astonishingly unwritten, untaught and unknown outside that region. We should have had Manu Pillai to complete the set, because Manu is the other one that's been opening up this history. But we're very, very pleased to have Kamini Dattapani, who's wonderful Raja Chola, came out last year, from Alan.
Two, we've seen significant growth in AI use, and we're going to continue to see that. So the question, I think, looking forward is, how big are these emissions going to be? And my conclusion is anybody who gives you a confident estimate is making it up. And here's why. We know, or to a high degree of likelihood, that the use of artificial intelligence is going to increase exponentially in the years ahead. It'd be very surprising if that doesn't happen. At the same time, it's highly likely that the efficiency of the hardware being used is going to improve dramatically, if not exponentially. In fact, the statistic I saw is between 2005 and 2015 and 2021, data center workload increased 260%.
Impact AI will have on the broader societal forces that are in operation, right? So this is a broad question, but I want both of you to take a crack at it and then we'll open it up, which is, what's your sense of what this means for people sitting in the audience in their daily lives? How should they be thinking about this, and maybe how should they be using it, right? So take a crack at any of it.
I think this is a debate about climate. So for me, one of the things that I'm always worrying about is I'm not sure what I'm doing, how it's having an impact on the environment. I don't have that information. I would love to have, for example, an app which takes all my data and tells me, look, if you just did this, you would reduce your carbon emissions by so much. And that just seems so realizable, and a use of the technology to be able to collect my data. And that will also, I would be happy to use that data and submit it to a larger project to help us understand more globally how to reduce emissions from our behaviors. But for it to tell me, look, switching off the lights at night really is, don't worry about that. Much better to worry about, your flight to India, or whatever, or making NFTs or whatever it is. So I think that personally, I feel would be very empowering for us. I don't know how many people feel they know how their lives impact on climate.
Let's take a quick poll. How many people would be interested in tracking their daily emissions? Well, there you go. Right,
I'm going to do that startup, I think.
I think there are already apps. Like I'm also looking at
sure.
I'm not going to mention names, but there are apps now out there that are trying to, of course, the authenticity and the ability to get the right data is still a...
The Industrial Revolution and the impact that it had on climate. Of course, the Industrial Revolution had a similar impact on the sort of jobs that people did. But the interesting thing about the Industrial Revolution is that it impacted across a generation. But this revolution is much faster. So a job that exists today will not be there in 10 years. So, we're really facing this with our undergraduates in Oxford, that, mathematicians might go on to become accountants. That's quite a common path. But actually, accountancy will not be a job in 10 years' time. There'll be very few accountants because AI is very, very good at doing that. But as with all of these technologies, new jobs emerge. So, there's the data curator. The curating of the data that gets given to an algorithm is an extremely important new job. And being able to know the sort of data and how to use it, that's a new kind of job. The prompter, somebody who can use these tools to really create something new by a prompt, that's a new kind of job. So I think with all of these things, and what we're going to need to do as educationalists in our universities is not just to teach a subject, but to teach people how to learn.
And how to think. Correct?
You have to think, but how to learn, because everyone's going to have to be retraining every 10 years because it's such a fast revolution.
Yeah.
The
question
can
is,
I raise a question about whether what you just said about accountants? Because I'm not sure that's right. So I recall reading a study of the expectations around accountancy when Excel spreadsheets were first released. And people said, this is the death of accountants because what they've been doing is calculating. And in fact, it has not led to that. What it's led to is as many accountants doing more sophisticated financial analyses than they did before. So do you think this is different?
Yeah, I do think this is different because the one thing that felt that the accountant as a human was able to sniff where the errors were in data, and they was felt that that was something the Excel spreadsheet couldn't do. But machine learning is very good at that. It's very good at picking up the anomaly in the pattern. And so one of the key skills that an accountant had in being able to feel where the data was inaccurate in some ways, that is something that now AI is very good at.
Will, since we're sitting at JLF,
I mean, I have obviously dipped into the Upanishads a great deal and refreshed my knowledge of some of them when I wrote Why I'm a Hindu and the Hindu Way. So it's not that that's foreign material, it simply didn't occur to me. And you're quite right, I think it would be wonderful to go back to them and coming across things like that. As to your particular choice of aphorism, you're right, when the student is near, the teacher will appear as that kind of Upanishadic wisdom for which there is really no modern equivalent, right? That is that when you need some instruction, you will find the instructor is perhaps the modern way of looking at it. Wonderful, thank you, ma'am. Just like that, you're supposed to think about what the line means rather than have it explained to you as we're doing here on stage this afternoon. But don't forget that, as you say, all my books are full of all these stories, and a lot of these, not a lot, but I would say at least 10% of the aphorisms in the book, or 8 to 10%, have appeared in context in other kinds of writing. And some of them are from my fiction, some of them are from my non-fiction. The Great Indian Novel pops up a few times here, simply because I did tend to sort of toss off aphorisms while writing that. And one of my favorites, which I thought Nidhi would come up with, is the British are the only people in history crass enough to make revolutionaries out of Americans, which no laughter. Oh gosh, all right, so maybe she was right not to be. Anyway, so that's one. But what I'm saying is you can see some of those in context in a larger story. But the idea of a book like this is for you to just read the line and think about it. But do dig into one of the longer books. You might find more rewarding stories on them. Assets. And I hope that ultimately we will be able to focus on the larger picture of what our country needs for the future. I remember when I came in for my very first electoral contest after a full career at the UN. I came for the elections of 2009. Nobody in the party that I was fighting for expected to win that election. And we won with a bigger majority than the previous time. So anything can happen in elections. I think it all depends. It's all in your hands. It's how you vote, folks, that's going to determine the outcome.
Ma'am, how do you still manage to not be preachy and be open to new ideas and keep learning?
But I always believe that mind is kind of like a parachute, right? You don't want to jump off a plane with a closed parachute and keep it closed. And in the same ways, you don't want to enter the world with a closed mind. So I've always believed that I don't think there's been a single day of my life that I have not learned something new. It could be a new word, a new idea, a new insight into the aphorisms of the Upanishads.
What is the new word that you learned? Please tell us.
Today I've
we
not
need to
learned,
Google it.
Today I've not learned a new word, all right. But I've learned, I've been reminded of a very insightful Upanishadic aphorism. So there I've learned something new. I mean, I think if you go through life with an open enough mind, you will discover there's always plenty to learn, but you've got to be receptive to it. Those antennae have got to be up there to draw from others rather than closing yourself up. I mean, I drove here from Delhi. So obviously inside the car I wasn't learning very much. I was dealing with WhatsApp messages. So if at all I was learning anything, it was the wrong things. But the fact is that having got here, within 2 sessions I was able to learn something. Jokes apart, all of us can learn all the time. We just have to be open to it. And the title was specifically meant for those of us, particularly the uncles as we call them in this country, who love giving updesh, who love giving advice to everybody else, but who seem completely closed when it comes to actually being aware of themselves or even of learning anything new for themselves.
Those uncles.
It's permanent in any country. I mean, India is vastly larger than any one individual leader, one individual political party, or any majority. Ambedkar famously said in the Constituent Assembly, people who believe they're in the majority should remember that all majorities are by definition temporary. How temporary, we don't know. I mean, the Congress was in power for 30 years after 1947. Mr. Modi and his party may believe they're going to easily come back. We don't know. We believe that's in the hands of the people and maybe they won't come back. But even if they do, they won't be here forever. No one can be here forever. And therefore, ultimately, the way in which the system can change, young lady, the way in which the system can change would consist, it seems to me, of us being able to bring about that change through the choices we make. Now, for example, at one point, there was a serious attempt made during the previous BJP government of Mr. Vajpayee to say, why don't we change the constitution? And there was even a commission with a retired Supreme Court justice appointed to study the possibilities of that. Had they been re-elected, that might really have been a question put to the Indian people. Do you want a totally different system from the one we've got? It so happened it didn't come to that point because they lost the elections of 2004. But I'm just saying, systems can be changed. The question is, of course, that processes have to be gone through before they're changed. Ultimately, though, we have to preserve the right of the people to determine their own political destiny for themselves. That's the core definition of democracy. It is ruled by the people, of the people, for the people, the famous line of Abraham Lincoln. And for that, which form it takes is less important than that kernel of essential popular control. And that, I think, we have to ensure we all have the right, certainly under our present system and in the Constitution, we have the right to do that, to ensure we preserve democracy.
I just wanted to end with that. It has a lovely
That's a
illustration.
Joseph one too.
Yeah, it has a lovely illustration of the dog who's eating the sofa and he's got toilet paper all over him and stuff like that. So if you're a dog lover like me, you will get this one. Thank you very much. A big round of applause for Shashi Tharoor.
And Nidhi, there's that other one also from Joseph. If you think you like someone, get a second opinion about him from your dog.
I agree with that one too. Thank you everybody. Thank you.
Please join me once again in thanking Shashi Tharoor.
So I must admit, when I heard all this, I found it completely disorienting. Myths in one country, told in another country, translated into a global language, translated back into Hindi by Mahesh Dutt, who is here and who I would very much wish would tell us something about what it felt like to translate from English back into an Indian language. This is disorienting. And when I went back to Car, to read Car again after 20 years after I translated it, to say something today, I was struck by the fact that disorientation is very much what the experience of reading Car is about. That is, what Roberto Calasso left us is not so much the telling of thousands of stories, although that in itself is wonderful, but many people have told thousands of stories. What he left us was a particular way of telling those stories which makes us receptive to certain kinds of knowledge that are not easily summarized. For example, if we look at the first paragraph of Car, 5 lines, it starts with the sentence, "Suddenly an eagle darkened the sky." Okay, it's a black eagle with violet feathers. Strange, but not too difficult to imagine. Then we hear that from that eagle's claws are hanging an elephant and a turtle. Well, maybe to Indians they have seen this image, but I can assure you that to a Western reader, this is somewhat disquieting. Then we hear that the eagle's eyes flash out through leaves of a huge branch held in its beak.